Sag risings. This is Sparkles of Gold. I'm going to talk about your June 2023 forecast. I'm going to talk about 4 or 5 days, some interesting stuff that happens. And we're going to start off with something amazing, which you're going to love and feel elevated about. And it's June 3rd because there's a full moon that happens in your sign, Sagittarius. Big day for the year for you. This is the time. It always happens during the Gemini birthdays where we're going to have the full moon in Sag. So we have the Gemini sun on one side and the moon in Sagittarius on the other side. They're 180 degrees away from each other. That is a full moon. And this is just happening in your life in general, illuminating you and illuminating your quest. Because in the end, you are Jupiter ruled, and Jupiter is about being on a quest. Jupiter is currently in the sign of Taurus. And not only that, Mercury's in the sign of Taurus right now. The eclipses have been happening there, and we've also have Uranus in the sign of Taurus. I will tell you that day, there might be a surprise or two, even that week here when it deals with just how you relate and how you communicate. But in general, we just want to acknowledge you on this full moon in Sagittarius and how, in a sense, the quest that you're always on, the knowledge that you're always seeking, the joy and elevation and abundant energy that you like to have and to move around is elevated, at least on this day, and you get to have that, okay? So congratulations on your full moon. So on June 5th, several days later, Venus, the planet that deals with how we love and how we relate and relationships, also too, money and resources, enters in a fellow fire sign of Leo. And this is a big one because for everybody, because Venus will be in Leo not just for a month and a half. It will be there all the way from June to October. And the reason is because Venus is going to go retrograde in the summertime and do this whole story in Leo. How does this affect you? Well, it's interesting because the part of your chart that deals with how you move and travel and what you seek out, what you bring into your philosophical world, the ethics that you stand by, your spirituality too. This is the Leo part of your chart, and Venus here is going to have a story of transformation that's going to go on. And the reason why I bring up transformation is during a retrograde process, when a planet goes retrograde, a lot of times there's movement going forward, and then there's the part of the movement that has to go backwards and review, reclaim, and take things apart and put them back together again. Venus is going to go through a makeover, and this is happening in the part of your world that deals with foreign travel, higher knowledge, higher truth, things that are inherent in your Sagittarius nature, and it's about to go through a makeover. So you have to kind of gauge here that week and in the month of June of what means to you, what is part of your special code, and what code do you live by. And not only that, the actions that you take and the knowledge that you like to acquire and the things that you like to seek to bring into your world, in what way do you do that? Because it's about to change here for the rest of the year, and you're going to go through when I say makeover, it's like imagine getting a haircut or getting new clothes or bringing things into your new house, the new sheets for your bed, changing things around in the house. But in this sense, the changing around happens in your higher mind, and this happens for all summer. So I will be doing a separate Venus and Leo video for my channel in the month of June that talks about all the important dates. So when we get to June 11th, Mercury finally leaves the sign of Taurus after it's been there for several months and doing its retrograde story, and finally leaves there and enters your opposite polarity sign, the beautiful and incredible, mutable fellow sign of Gemini. And this part of your world is your partnerships and your relationship part of your house and the types of things that happen there. And now there's a lot of communication happening here in your partnerships and relationships. And I'm talking about relationships of all kinds. It's not just your intimate other if you have one, but all types of relationships. And there's a lot of chatter going on, a lot of sharing of information with Mercury being in Gemini. Mercury loves being in this sign. Now, sometimes the conversations can get a little too out of sorts and a little too weird and funky, and you have to gauge that and sometimes going too far. But in general, there's a lot of chatter here which can lead to other things, and it will lead to something else I'll say up in the video. I'll also bring up that on the 18th here, there is a new moon that happens in Gemini. 2 weeks after the full moon in your sign, we have the new moon in Gemini, which also deals with the relationship part of your house, and something new coming in or something that you can plant here, because in new moons, it always have to do with beginnings. And a lot of times with new moons, we can always look to 6 months later, which if we do that, 6 months later from the Gemini new moon, it happens in your relationship part of your house. 6 months later, we have the full moon that happens there. So a lot of times the themes and stories that are created or planted here show themselves 6 months later. So that happens on the 18th. When we get to the 21st, the Gemini birthdays end, the Cancer birthdays start, summer in the northern hemisphere, winter in the southern hemisphere, and several days later, on the 26th of June, Mercury leaves the sign of Gemini, where it's been conversing in that partnership and relationship part of your house, and leaves and goes into the sign of Cancer. And now the talk has to do with more intimate, more darker at times, more private stories, and also has to do with how you're connected to resources in general and other people's resources and the possible gains you can get from there. This is more of an emotional conversation rather than the more cerebral, quick one that happened in the relationship part of your house. Now we get more intimate, more one-on-one, and we're talking about emotional connection, but also resources connected to emotional connection. And this can get very, very interesting. That goes on to the end of June into July. That is a quick review of a interesting month for you. You're on stage the beginning of the month with the full moon. You're also on stage with all the Gemini stuff that happens with the Gemini birthdays, Mercury being in Gemini, the new moon in Gemini. It's about you and the other, you in relationships and what is said. And on a deeper level, with Venus being in Leo for months and months, it's about your quest and what the highest truth means to you. If you've never been here before, hit the subscribe channel. I'm Sparkles of Gold, aka Nicolas Polymonaco, sparklesofgold.com. Check out my past videos, share, please leave a comment, because I do get to them eventually. Leave a comment down below. And I'll see you on the next video.